It's time for an Ultimate Unsider's look at an uncomfortable movie. Hello and welcome to RotD Review of the Day, and today I'm looking at the 2018 movie Unsane. This is a movie that is not necessarily a traditional horror movie, certainly not your traditional scary movie, but it does have a very intense, dramatic element to it with some horrific portions, and I felt that it fit within this channel. I kept seeing a lot of really good reviews of it. I wanted to chime in on that and give it a whirl, and that's what I'm doing now. So overall, I'm really glad I watched this. I thought it was a very, very good movie. Perhaps not to the level of timeless greatness, but overall, very good, very competent movie with amazing acting. And, well, to get into it, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one follows a young woman who has moved to a new city from some distance, and she has a job that she just started. She has an apartment, she's building her life, and you get the sense as things go on that the reason she moved is that she has previously been the victim of a stalker and potentially some violent behavior there. She knew how to switch up her lunch routine and her work schedule and so on and so forth. There were these ingrained habits that she has developed as a victim, and in doing so and moving to a new city, obviously she needs to go to a counseling session, find a new therapist, and she does so. She has the initial intake and interview with the mental health professional, and everything seems to be going pretty well. They have a good conversation. It's a fairly benign conversation, and at the end of it, she is incarcerated against her will. She is held in the mental health facility with nurses and disrobing and putting in a room full of cots with other patients, and she has no wherewithal to secure her release. They feel that she is a danger to herself or others, and they need to hold her for a certain period of time until they feel like she is not. So now she's on a quest to prove her sanity while also in a very uncomfortable situation, while also dealing with her behavioral triggers that she has developed as part of the scarring from her past, as well as compounded by the fact that she believes that she is now seeing one of the nurses that is handing out pills and helping out is her stalker that has followed her to this new city inexorably. Overall, I really thought the plot was original. It was done well. It had a good, sensitive representation of behavioral triggers and scars, and I really liked how they handled the mental health aspect of this movie. I do worry about a message that it was kind of giving off, and I want to discuss that more in the spoiler-filled deep dive because it's a little bit less about this movie and more about kind of an overall theme. It's more of a general conversation piece. But back to this movie, I gave the plot a 20 out of 25. Very well done. Good characters. I was pretty impressed with this one. The intent, I gave a 19 out of 25. This was a very uncomfortable movie in parts, and it didn't have any traditional scares to it, and if it tried, then it didn't really succeed that terribly well. But this wasn't really trying for the jump scare motif. It was more terrifying in the sense of what is potentially a reality for some folks, or what could be for you. And that's part of the message that I'm concerned about. I'll be discussing in the deep dive. Regardless, I get the sense that this movie was potentially trying to be more unnerving than it was, that maybe it was trying for the Requiem for a Dream, 120 Days of Sodom, or even Antichrist levels of just effed up. And it had those elements to it, but it really didn't succeed on that level. So if that's what it was trying for, not quite so much. But it was good, it was unnerving, and it did a good job of making the audience question the character's mental state, along with making while the character is questioning her own mental state, and clearly the nurses and administration are questioning her mental state, it makes the audience do so too, without actually milking it. And I really had to appreciate that as well. It wasn't a central theme throughout. It was more just an element of the movie and of the character that it tinkered with, and I really had to appreciate that. I thought it really fleshed things out with the storyline and with the character much better. So overall, 19 out of 25 points. The acting was the standout of this movie. The two major leads of Claire Foy and Joshua Leonard did an incredible job, especially Claire. She knew when to hold back. There were definitely moments, especially towards the end, when it required a lot of energy, a lot of acting output, and she knew when to dial that back for the sake of a level of intensity for the character and overcoming those behavioral triggers for the sake of survival. And I really had to appreciate the performance that were given there. But everybody else in the movie also did a very good job. Stand out by Jay Farrow and Polly McKee as another patient and a nurse, respectively. Jay did a really good job as kind of a light in the darkness character. I really had to appreciate what he brought to the table there. Polly McKee as the nurse did a really fantastic job of not necessarily a malicious nurse, certainly not a malicious nurse. There wasn't really a whole lot of Nurse Ratchetish stuff going on. It was more, this was her 9 to 5. She's been jaded by it over the years, and she just wants to clock in and clock out with as much of a peaceful time in between as possible. And anything that disrupts that, then she is going to see with just kind of a blank stare and an ambivalence and guards, come on, attitude. And she really sold the performance. I really liked what she brought to the table there. So 22 out of 25 points. The technical, this one I had a little trouble with. The film felt weird. Just the grain and the stock and the frames per second, the motion of it, just the general aesthetic feel of the filming quality felt a little weird to me. And I wound up looking it up, and it was filmed entirely on a cell phone. Granted, a nice one with 4K video recording capabilities, but a cell phone nonetheless. And Steven Soderbergh directed this movie. I have no doubt that if he wanted to, he could get his hands on some pretty expensive equipment. So clearly this was a choice that was made purposefully. And the one word that pops into my head with this is gimmick. And I don't like gimmicks for the sake of gimmicks. If you're going to use a gimmick, then make it serve the movie. And that's the question I have to kind of pull back and ask myself is, did this serve the movie? And I have to admit that I think it did. Is it better filmed like this? I honestly couldn't say. I don't know. It seems like maybe they probably could have done just as good of a job with something else. But what was brought to the screen, and did it serve the storyline? I would say yes, it did. There was a level of with the filming style that served the storyline, that it kind of enhanced the level of uncomfortableness for the character and for the audience that it did help. So, and they got some really great angles with it. On a technical level, I had to appreciate that. There were some great angles, some uncomfortable close-ups that were here, and that really served the storyline well. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't it wasn't distracting. It just simply served the emotion and the psychological state of the character. So the technical gets a pretty high mark for me, regardless of the fact that it was filmed on a cell phone. It gets a few points taken off just because I felt like there were moments, especially towards the end when things were kind of picking up and ramping up a fair bit, that there were scenes that felt a little bit like they were dragging too much and probably could have been using some trims in the editing room. The pacing just felt a bit off. It felt like, well, now we need to be, we've been walking, now we need to be running, and, well, why are you still walking? And it just, it felt a little off with that. especially in contrast with the content that was going on the screen. So I gave the technical 18 out of 25 points. And that gives us a total score of 79 out of 100 points. Ultimately, I would recommend this movie to people. If you're looking for a Halloween-esque slasher gore fest movie, then skip this one. But if you want a thought-provoking, terrifying movie of what is potentially a societal problem with some strong horrific elements and some perception manipulation, this is a great movie for that. And I would recommend it any day of the week. So... kudos to Steven Soderbergh for this movie. Kudos to all the actors that were in it. Just a phenomenal job altogether. And I think that should about do it. Again, look for the deep dive, spoiler-filled discussion video I'll be having on this one, because I'm going to be discussing some thematic concepts within. Other than that, thank you for making me a part of your day. And next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.